So, the spiritual way, there's where we are today. We're looking at this concept, the spiritual way. Well, of course, there is only the spiritual way. There is no other way because we are spiritual beings. So, the spiritual way is the natural way. The spiritual way is the way of goodness and kindness and givingness and generosity. The spiritual way is the way of consciousness, the way of mindfulness. The spiritual way is the way of surrender. The spiritual way is the way of non-attachment, non-resistance. There's two challenging ones. The spiritual way is the way of divine love, and the way of divine love is the way of the givingness of life out unto itself in so many different and wonderful ways. So that is the spiritual way. And linked to the spiritual way always there is that understanding of the prayerful way. Spirituality and prayer go hand in hand. But the way we look at spirituality and the way we look at prayer is very different to the way that we once looked upon it, those of us who were deeply entrenched in ancient orthodoxy. When we look at prayer, for example, we look at it according to the way of new thought, to look at it in the light of the new awareness of ancient wisdom and how that is applied. So the spiritual way is very much a prayer-filled way. It has to do with an environment in which we live. The spirituality is an environment in which we live, and it's filled with that sense of prayerfulness. And prayerfulness is that energy that raises us in praise, raises us in gratitude, raises us in sacred service. Now that's what prayer does. So, contrary to what we used to think prayer to be, some of us, as that opportunity to let God know where we are, what's going on, coming to God with the agenda, with the honey-do list and all of that God knows I certainly did in the past. It's not any of that at all. That has no place in the presence of God, because in the presence of God there is only a wholeness and a fullness and a completeness. However, as I encouraged our 9 o'clock folk, please keep writing out your honey-do list and keep writing out your agenda that you used to take to God somewhere up there, out there somewhere. Because what that does is gets us clear. What that does, it gets us clear about how you and I have come into agreement with everything we're lacking and all our limitation. That's what that is. You and I coming into agreement and saying amen to all our ailments. Here they are spelled out. So first part is to do that and then release it and let it go. Surrender it back unto the nothingness from whence it came, and be open and receptive to why we really consciously step into the prayerful remembrance that we are in the presence of God, and God's presence is in us always and forever. And I don't have to take myself in prayer to God. Prayer does not take me to God. God didn't go anywhere. God is still right where I am. Right where I am, God is. So, in fact, instead of showing up in prayer to negate ourselves, which is what we have been used to doing in the past, God be merciful to me, a sinner. I'm a wicked, sinful, horrible wretch of a mistake, a human mistake at this or that or the other and whatever. And is there any hope for me? And could you please, if you could see it in your heart, to forgive me and all of that stuff. That does not belong in the presence of God, to the presence of God, has nothing to do with the presence of God at all. That's all a human construct, and it's the result of the erroneous thinking, erroneous feeling we've allowed ourselves to indulge in, and it's the result of all the stories we've told ourselves and the stories we received from others about ourselves and come into agreement with. So we never show up in prayer as miserable, wretched sinners. We show up prayerfully as the images and as the likeness of God. We show up in prayer to recognize ourselves as spirit, as source recognizes us as that which is good and very good, as that which is indeed the image and the likeness of our source, of our creator. That's the way New Thought teaches us to show up in prayer. In celebration of the fact that we are the chosen expression of spirit, that spirit chose this form to express itself through. We show up in prayer recognizing that within us is the living presence of the Almighty, the omniscient, that which is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent. That's what we're celebrating in prayer. That somehow or another, we are more than we ever could think we are, or feel we are, or believe we are. Somehow or another, there's an impulse in us that knows that. And that's how we show up in prayer, as the celebration of life, expressing itself in praise, in gratitude, in praise, in gratitude, in praise, in gratitude. That's the only reason why we show up in prayer. To consciously praise and give thanks for all that we are, for what we are, and how we are, and whose we are. And the rest takes care of itself. You see, that's the purpose of mindful prayerfulness. And spirituality is nothing if it's not mindfulness, consciousness, and the ability to be present, and present to the truth that sets us free. So, that's what our spirituality, unfolding in and through and by means of us, does through us and for us and as us. And that's where it takes us back to the realization that each one of us is the living vehicle of spirit, the indwellingness of spirit, the image and likeness of spirit, so that spirit can know itself as this form by means of me and express itself as this form through me. That's what prayer is all about. Now, in the past, I have spent endless hours reciting wonderful, beautiful, poetic prayers, reading wonderful, beautiful, poetic prayers in both the convent and in the ashram. Beautiful. And those were halcyon days to some extent indeed. But let me tell you, all the recitation of the prayer formulae, all of the talking at, all of the discussion with the source of my being pales dreadfully by comparison to the moments that I have spent in stillness, in silence, sitting in the quietude, waiting upon, as we say, spirit, waiting to hear, waiting to feel, waiting to sense the presence that only can be done in the stillness and in the quietness of being, in the listening mode, in the surrendered mode, in the mode that puts aside all agenda, ceases the chatter and the discussion, which is always monologue, and just sits and waits in patience. And this has been torturous at times in the beginning, and it has been frustrating at times in the beginning. It has been irritating at times in the beginning. It has been annoying and all of the things you could think of in the beginning. But when you stay with it, when you stick to it, when you keep showing up, when you keep making yourself available to it, then eventually, that amazing thing happens that was looked for all the while before, through the recitation of the Holy Office, the recitation of the great Sanskrit Psalms, the recitation of prayers, the reciting of prayer aimed at a God somewhere separate from myself. So prayerfulness has to do with living in conscious awareness of the presence, or what we call practicing the presence of God. It's to be aware all the time that I am more than my little self, and that my little self is not the only thing here that has to handle this. I can call upon something much more powerful than I am to help me in any challenging situation, because that power and the presence is in residence right where I am. And that's what spirituality is all about, getting in touch with that. Spirituality, this thing that understands that I am a living prayer, and that everything I think and say and do is a prayer. It may be a good prayer, a bad prayer, an indifferent prayer, but it's a prayer. And my goal is to make it a meaningful one, to make it a conscious one, a productive one, a raising one, and a praising one, and a blessing one, and one that makes a contribution, So the whole idea of living an authentic spiritual life is to live my life out loud in beyond technicolor, because of the magnificence that resides within me. And by living my life out loud, I can enter into the quietude, into the stillness, and into the silence. And I can become what Irenaeus said in the 2nd century, that the glory of God is man, woman, fully alive. And as I asked this morning, when was the last time you got giddy with delight looking in the mirror saying, I am the glory of God, fully alive? When did you last do that? When did you last have that experience? And yet, if not, why not? Because that's the truth. Because God, whether you're asleep to it or awake to it or not, is fully alive in you. You can choose to be fully alive in God. The choice is ours, you see. That's why we're here in this room. Because there's something in us that impels us, won't let us alone until we come home to that truth of our own being, until we're able to have peace of mind, peace of heart, peace of soul, that we're able to live a satisfying, nurturing, fulfilling, contented, productive life. I was telling folks this morning too, I got this magazine, Mindfulness magazine, and in it there was the story of a mother who had decided she'd gone on a mindful retreat and came back and decided everybody in that household was going to be mindful from now on in. So she asked her children 2 questions every evening. Every evening she was going to ask her children 2 questions. And those questions would be, because they were very much included in this mindfulness, what one thing have you done today to serve another, to help another, to give to another? That was the first question. And the youngsters had no problem answering that question. They were able to come up with some way they had helped somebody that day. Second question was, now, how has somebody in your day helped you? Who was that person and how have they helped you? And the kids are going, and they couldn't think of it, ne'er a one. And then the mother goes, are you serious? Are you kidding me? Did I not just drive you all around Heaven's Half Acre here all day long to go to your this and your that and the other? Did I not produce a beautiful meal for you when you went out this morning? Did you not go out with a beautifully packed lunch? And the list went on and on and on. Isn't it interesting, kids, that you couldn't see that? Well, of course, then she burst out laughing. And she said, now, that's my point. We're not mindful. We're not mindful of, what's going on in our lives and how people, that it takes a huge village in order to help us to be all that we can be. thousands and thousands of people it takes every single day to clothe us and feed us and take care of all of our needs, that we have thousands and thousands of people to do that for you and for me. And so the whole idea is to be aware. Are you living your life? Are you living your life in a way that you're awake and alert and aware out loud? Or are you just moping through it, you know? Are you just gliding through it, moping through it, meandering through it, not paying much attention about anything? We want to be deliberately alive and deliberately living. We want to be vital. We want to be an energetic. We want to be a dynamic that moves through life in a way that absolutely brings it up, raises it. That's what we want to do. We want to know for ourselves what several people have come to know about themselves. You know, I love, as you know, Meister Eckhart, and he was saying, look, there's only one thing God asks of any one of us. There's only one thing that God asks of you. And it's this, that you could leave yourself sufficiently in order to allow God to be God in you. And he's talking about the small self of ourselves, the ego self of ourselves, to leave ourselves sufficiently so that we can allow God to be God in and by means of each one of us, which is the way the divine design is set up, you know. And to understand that when we are in need of something, the answer is within ourselves before we even are able to define what that need is. Before you ask, I have answered. Before you're finished speaking, I know your need. And that's why there's no need to show up with the list, with a particular agenda. It's already known. Already known. And did I not give you with great pleasure the kingdom? Did I not give you the kingdom with great pleasure? Now, why would we be given the kingdom and all of its fullness? For one reason and one reason alone. So that we could share from it, serve from it, be generous in our interaction from it, so that we could be as the image and likeness of Spirit. We're here to be that image and likeness. Now, that will mean different things to each and every one of us. But what it means to me at the end of the day, after all the searching, soul searching, and all of the researching, and all of the participation in different kinds of spiritual communities, it means the one thing. You're here to show up and be in sacred service. That's all. And not only are you here to show up and be in sacred service, you're here to be in that sacred service with a definite disposition of unconditional giving, unconditional service, and coming from the sweetness of the realization that it is so blessed and so wonderful to give. And that in doing so, with that attitude, coming from that sweetness, you are prospered in every single way yourself, because that's how life works. But of course, if you're giving to get, it doesn't work. If you're giving with conditions, it doesn't work. If you're giving with attachments, it doesn't work. And that's what causes an awful lot of us upsetness and sometimes even pain. I hear people all the while say, you know, I've given so much, I've done so much, wouldn't you think that in return, blah, 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 blah. Well, if you're thinking that way, you'll never get the return. And you certainly won't get it from the people you think you ought to get it from, should get it from, are owed from. It will come back to you in another way, but it's seldom from the things you give it to or the people you give it to. It comes in other ways. So the whole idea is to be singing the song of joy, the song of abundance, the song of delight, the song of generosity, and for no other purpose than I can do this, and I want to do this, and it's mine to do, and I'm happy to do it, And I don't expect any return for it. None whatsoever. Not a darn thing. You owe me nothing. No one owes me a darn thing because there's no one to owe me. There is only God in multitudinous ways showing up in my life. And God owes me nothing. 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 And so I also smiled at the same article. There was a visitor from another country, and watching the television one day, he said, gosh, if you didn't know much about Americans, you would think that all Americans need to keep them happy and give them a meaningful life is stuff and food and drink and medication. Because that's what the messages from the television was indicating. That if you had the stuff, and if you had that food, and you drank this stuff, and you took this medication or this cream or whatever, you're made. All is well. You can climb that mountain with that bum knee. Just rub this on and you'll be fine. Whatever. Whatever. So that we are represented in the world as a community of people that get their joy, get their happiness, and get their meaning from consumerism, from accumulation, and from materialism. That's the kind of idea that we give, because stuff matters. Accumulating matters. Acquiring matters. And so when we're on the spiritual trajectory, that all goes by the board, because we know that doesn't matter. Now here's the thing. As soon as it doesn't matter, and we become the giving us of light back onto ourselves, all that stuff comes to us. All that stuff comes to us. And it's not good and it's not bad. Nothing is good or bad. It's what we do with it and how we use it that makes something good or bad. And so, if you and I are to live the spiritual life, the authentic spiritual prayer-filled life of consciousness and mindfulness and open receptivity to the calling that comes from within us to express the good that wants to emerge through us, then life takes on a whole new vibrancy and vitality and vim and vigor and zest. And we can feel good about it no matter what's going on in it, knowing that the challenges are there only to be moved through, for something to be learned as a result of that, and for us to be added to as a consequence of it, of the experience. And we cannot do that if we are fear-filled. The thing about practicing the presence of God takes away the fear that we are entertaining unconsciously or consciously. And when we're fearless, we're unstoppable. And when we're not bothered or annoyed or perturbed about this, that, or the other, we're free to be the full expression of spirit. And it's an amazing thing. So when we show up in mindfulness to connect consciously with our source, we're doing it from God is, I am. And in stillness and quietness, we grow in confidence, because the scriptures do say, and the scriptures are right in this, in quietude and stillness shall your confidence be. And so if we can persist in that, we will hear, we will feel, we will experience that actual amazing grace that fills us. We will have a sense of the moreness of spirit supporting us. And we will know ourselves eventually as spirit knows us, as that great thing of beauty, as that joy forever, as that in which God is well pleased, as that which is the image and the likeness of spirit. So remember, when you show up in celebration, in prayer, it's to celebrate the life form that you are, the instrument that you are that allows spirit its full expression through you. So you're singing the praises and you're singing gratitude in and through and by means of the power and the presence that is within you. And all that you're doing is acknowledging that life is good, life is on my side, life supports me, and all is well. Because right where I am, I'm in the power, I'm in the presence of the source of my being, the creator of my being, the sustainer of my being, and the provider of all of my good, but most importantly, the lover of my being. That cannot ever be diminished by an iota. So always and ever is your prayer and my prayer. To God be the glory in me, through me, by means of me, always and forever. And so it is.
We invite you to experience Dr. Moira in person on Sundays. Our services are at 9 a.m. and 11 a.m., and childcare is available. Please join us. If you enjoy these messages and would like to make a donation to our center, please visit our website at redondocsl.org. Thank you for your support of this ministry.